and the only thing that's different is the extreme C-terminal tail. So Eric found this region of the C-terminal tail, 17 amino acids, to be a hotspot for aggregation, HSA, using an online tool called AgriScan. And when this was run through Rosetta modeling prediction or AlphaFold, it formed a beta sheet region. So that might be the structure that's causing the aggregation of the B isoform. So from this, I ordered this peptide and then thought I'd do some biophysical analyses on it to see what structures it was forming. So I did secular dichromosome to see what the secondary structure was. This is my result here. So on the right is the standard CD spectra for various secondary structures. So in red, it's the beta sheet, so and then in green, it's the random coil. And so my spectra looks like a mixture of the beta sheet and then the random coil. So it goes negative here like a beta sheet and then goes further negative like the extended version. And an interesting thing, so I tried to do the melting experiments.
Sorry, Ruth, I'm just going to butt in on other people's behalf here because I'm pretty sure that nearly no one else here is used to doing CDs. So can you just take us through that a little bit more slowly? Do you just do a visual prediction by comparing with those standards and saying, oh yes, it's mostly beta, or is the software there sort of spit out a prediction? It's mostly
it's visual, and you gave me some software that does a prediction. It has percentages. It didn't. The prediction that that one had went up to 260 nanometers instead of 250, so it wasn't hugely accurate. But it did say it was made. It was like 40% beta sheet and then random coil and a mixture of other things.
And what actually happens in the experiment, because you've got pre-melt, post-melt?
Yeah, so initially I just did 25-degree look at what it is, and it was the same spectrum as this. And then we did melting, and it measures it. And you can see if, initially the melting experiment, you can see if it unfolds, and it should go like that, but mine was like this. And we're like, oh, okay, what's going on there? Let's look at the spectra. So it's pre-melt, just before I did any of the melting 25, and then post-melt, so at 90 degrees, what's the structure in blue, and then after, again at 25 to see, supposedly after it would have refolded. But as you can see, it's the same at each point, so there was no melting. It has the same structure, so it must be very stable. So
I suppose the key point there is if you had a folded beta structure, like a tin barrel or something, it would just completely change.
Yeah, it should unfold, and then you should see refolding, hopefully, as you move back to 25, which is, well, we weren't really sure what to expect. I was expecting something to melt, but because it didn't, and we thought that this region's causing aggregation, it must be forming a very stable aggregate based on this. There was also a suggestion of fibril formation. There's beta sheets involved in fibrils. So from that, we thought we'd at least try and look at the size of this aggregate that's forming, and you can do an easy experiment, dynamic light scattering for that. So that's what I did first, just to see the diameter. And basically, well, 1 micron is basically the limit of DLS, which it's basically at after aggregation. I should note that I spun it down first, and initially, so these are just 3 different runs. Initially, it was about, well, here, and then it moved to there. So it's the aggregation's dynamic. But even when it was about here, it was like off the scale of all of the references that Catherine Stott had for the size of the protein complexes that form. So it's pretty big, and it would definitely be large enough to see by negative stain TEM.
So what's Catherine's largest size marker?
I can't remember the name of the protein, but it was about 700 kilodaltons. So this was big. Well, I mean, it's hard to really say from diameter to size. Definitely big. Basically, it's a conclusion from this. And then I tried to do some negative stain. So I'll show you some images. So this is probably, well, either lots of aggregation or it's just kind of floating on top. It's not really in focus. It's kind of see. But these sort of structures that you can see here, so zoom in there, are probably sort of smaller subunits of the larger aggregates that are forming. And they look, well, it's hard to see if they are regular, but they could be regular enough to visualize by OEM, but they might be packed a bit close together. So I think I need to try some different conditions to see if I can get them more separated. An individual one for that. And then it's another image that I took. So I was doing a training session with the negative stain technician, and she said that this could be a fibril, but it's pretty hard to tell at this resolution. But I didn't see that many fibrils, so it looks more like it's just sort of forming aggregates that not fibrous, but there could still be some. And then that's an image of a large aggregate that is forming. You can sort of still see the subunits in the background. It's not really easy to make out. So yeah, it's forming large aggregates as the DLS predicted, and we know that they're heat stable from the CD, and we just need to find out what the structure is. So as I said, I want to test the different buffer conditions to see if I can prevent the formation of the extreme aggregates. So it's currently in the buffer that was needed for CD. So it's 50 millimolar salt, 10 millimolar phosphate, and 32% acetonitrile, which is quite high. But it's very hydrophobic peptide, so I needed some help to get it to be soluble. But I'm going to try and reduce that and see if I can change the aggregation properties, and then try different salt conditions, maybe pH as well. And then there's a flavin assay that you can do. This binds to beta-rich structures, so I can do this in a plate reader, and it'll fluoresce when it binds. And that should show if there is actually beta structure in these aggregates. And I can also test different salt conditions with this plate reader assay to see if that sets it. And then since the DLS showed that the aggregation formation was dynamic, I can try and determine the solution structure with analytical ultracentrifugation, and then long term to try and purify and probe the structure of the full-length RPMSB. Now that I've got an idea of what it might behave like from the 17 peptide in the C-terminal tail. Any questions on that?
But I don't want to stop other people from asking, but I'll just to kick off there. Because the DLS showed that the aggregation was dynamic, is that really a rationale for using AUC? I would have thought that something that is really sort of dynamically assembling might be a nightmare in AUC. And I say this as a complete hypocrite, having suggested to you the other day that you try AUC, but is that really the right rationale there? Because, and Yi might want to chip in here as well, because I would have thought with AUC that if you've got something that is actually continuously changing its state of
it would have to be a little bit homogeneous in the way that it aggregates. You'd hope that it kind of goes at the same rate, I think. And we don't know if it does that, so that is a good point.
What do you think about that?
I mean, you say it's dynamic. It's still concentration dependent, it's not. I mean, we can just swing different concentrations. Maybe it's I mean, if the assembly happens in stages, and maybe we can look at individual intermediates or something. I never really know before we do one of those experiments.
So, okay, so in your view, it's worth doing the AUC irrespective of the outcome. It will tell you something about.
Yes, especially for species this big. I wouldn't call it aggregation or anything. It will be a quick experiment actually. I mean, it will set them quite quick and give you a rough idea of what we're really looking at.
Actually, this is a really minor thing. In terms of terminology, though, really, aggregation or aggregate really refers to something that's insoluble, doesn't it? I think it's better to keep that terminology because all of the things you've been looking at, with the exception of maybe of the EM, actually rely on the protein being soluble for the DLS and the CD. Because if it really is aggregate, it's kind of beyond, but it's very difficult to analyze. Okay, so AUC, I agree, it does make sense. With the EM, who else has looked at that so far? So you had the negative stain technician looked at it as well.
Yeah, I think we'd have to send it to them because they would know if it was going to be worth looking at in cryo-EM. I showed it to Andrea. She said it looks interesting, but she didn't really say much more than that.
Okay. Yeah, what did you think of those negative stains? The sort of background where you've got the dense array of potentially smaller particles. Did you have a view on that?